Welcome back. Time for our weekly look at some of this week's media issues. Welcome to media commentator Brian Edwards and listener columnist Bill Ralston, and this week former Herald editor Gavin Ellis, who has dealt with many leaked stories in his time, plus many stories involving our secret services. Which brings us, of course, to, well, it was the big story of the week, the Kitteridge report into the GCSB, which turned up in the Dominion on Tuesday morning. And we've got the masthead of that newspaper that we can show you, which shows the leaked paper. There it is, the leaked report rather, illegal spying. It blasted across the front page, and then on the next day it came up with the illegal spying kept secret, and followed on with that story with Andrea Vance. Bill Ralston, if I can start with you, this was in essence the leak, wasn't it? It came out on Tuesday, and that's what the Dominion went with.
Well, that's right. I mean, but that's only the latest implosion in what is one of the longest running stories I've ever seen. It began with Kim.com, arguably with the Urawera raids case too, but attention began to turn on the GCSB, and it's just grown and grown and grown until in the last week we've seen the State Services Commissioner coming out, Ferguson, who you had on the program this morning, Fletcher on John Campbell's show. You know, you normally don't hear these people talking about this kind of issue, and the great thing about the Kitteridge report is that we get an inside look inside, well, what should be an intelligence agency, but sounds more like Maxwell's Smart and Control, you know, if you can go back that far.
And in fact, nothing has changed. Way back in 1969, I interviewed Brigadier Gilbert, who was then the chief spy, and it was all exactly the same stuff. Yep. At that time, they had lots of agents going around in universities, and they were very interested in the Chinese, but unfortunately the Chinese all had similar names, so they'd be investigating a Mr. Wong when it was his brother or brother-in-law, another Mr. Wong, and so on. And the whole thing was just total and absolute madness.
The government has nonetheless, though, it's front-footed this really, hasn't it? Rolling out, first of all, we saw Ferguson, then we saw Rennie, and then we saw Fletcher.
Well, they started off by wrong-footing it. John Key made a statement that placed Bruce Ferguson in the position of being less than competent, if you like, in his handling of the role, which created really a vacuum into which Bruce Ferguson had to step to defend himself. So we started off with Bruce Ferguson defending the way that he had run the GCSB on Campbell Live. What he said meant that it was necessary then for Ian Rennie to jump into the fray because of what Ferguson had said about the process of Ian Fletcher's appointment. And then what Ian Rennie said led Ian Fletcher to do the same thing. So it was like dominoes falling. So I don't think it was well planned. I think that the initial gaffe, if you like, was John Key saying something that led to Ferguson having to defend himself.
There's an interesting ingredient here, isn't there? And that all these people appeared on the same programme. Yeah. They all appeared on John Campbell. Now, the government must hate John Campbell for a whole variety of reasons. One of those reasons is Christchurch, you know, the other is Novapay, all of that stuff. Why John Campbell? Why would you give all this to John Campbell?
Well, they had to go for the same program.
And you can't front up on 7 Sharp and have a joke about it. I mean, you know, that's the big problem with that format.
Why not then go morning report?
Hold on, I think it'd be entirely appropriate for the GS to be appearing on 7 Sharp.
The real question is, who leaked the Kitteridge report and why? Was it the government leaking it to take the gloss off Ferguson, or was it perhaps a leak from the GCSB to the Labour opposition and from there to Andrea Vance?
Right, well, Gavin Ellis, you have an inside idea.
I don't think it was the government. The leak really took the gloss off what Key was doing in China, and that was very important to him. He wanted to be seen as the international statesman, doing good deals, bringing money into New Zealand, and that became absolutely subsumed by the problems with the GCSB. So I don't think it was the government. It reminded me of the leak of the Hutton report in Britain, the dirty dossier report, where the Sun ran that in exactly the same time frame, the day before it was released. But of course, this precipitated the release here of the Kitteridge report. But what I think happened was a Fairfax reporter has been in somebody's office, and that somebody has said, "I need to go to the toilet, I may be some time." They very, very carefully said that they had seen the report.
Fairfax had seen,
They did not have a copy of it. In other words, There was no question of theft or misappropriation of the document. They'd simply seen it. So there are no fingerprints on this. That means that it could be anybody who had access to it.
Not a lot of direct quotes as well, because it's an old trick to change. If there's only a dozen reports, you change a line here and there, a word on the page to be able to identify.
I mean, they may not have
it.
actually read it. They may have seen the report and then somebody gave them an executive summary.
Yep.
Bill, what I'm intrigued about with this is that people like, well, Ian Fletcher can't appear just on Campbell Live, one would assume, without getting approval from the PM's office.
Absolutely, there'd be a refer-up. They have a no surprises policy. You know, the heads of departments would normally refer to a minister before making a major appearance. And in this case, I think the government ran Mr Fletcher into the studio, chauffeured him if necessary to get him on, because he was a surprisingly good television performer, I thought. I thought he came across well.
Yeah, I thought he was very good indeed. It was amazing, really, that whole interview. But coming back to Brigadier Gilbert, I agree with you. I mean, it's just extraordinary that these people are there at all. I mean, what is a spy chief doing on television? I mean, it's a very basic question. Why is a spy chief on television talking about what he's doing? That's weird to me.
I want to talk about John Key's relationship with the media and how he's being viewed in the media. We do have a cartoon I think we can bring up by Tom Scott. There it is. If John Key were a magician, for the next trick, I need the help of a complete stranger from the audience. That boy with his hand up. You've never seen me before, have you? Says John Key. No, Dad. Now, of course, this is a play on the whole brain fade scenario.
And Tom Scott's a knucklehead for doing that.
What's happening with the relationship with John Key and the media?
I'm in a curious position here as an old-time Labour man, because I don't think he's been particularly fairly treated by the media at all. I mean, if you look at politicians, politicians are programmed not to admit their mistakes. And they don't admit their mistakes because they feel it will give ammunition to their opposition. And so this is what we've seen happening here. You can't do it. Helen Clark would not admit any mistakes. You know, so you have the driving the car too fast thing, nothing to do with her. You know, you have the signing the painting thing, nothing to do with her. And they can't and won't admit their mistakes. And one of the reasons, I think, is that after a period, they become just fed up with the bloody journalists. They're in Parliament for most of the time, and there the opposition's job is to say, yeah, boo sucks, got it wrong, and liar, liar, pants on fire. That's essentially what the opposition is there for. And then they go out into the corridor, and the media are doing exactly the same thing, only they're doing it as a tag team. So they get fed up, and now I think he's got fed up with the whole business now.
But you say John Key's a politician, but in fact, it's not, his background isn't in politics. And I think where he's got himself into trouble is when he's picked up the phone and organised a Sky City deal, for example, or picked up the phone and got Fletcher on. You know, he's a deal doer. And that's
in his favour in many respects, because, you know, this is a guy who can control the level of icicles in his blood. No, he's done that as a trader. Now, suddenly he's lost the ability to control the icicles. So, and he's lost his cool.
Let's go back to the beginning of this for a moment, all right? So he's accused of shoulder tapping an old school friend. All of the media now are still referring to this guy as an old school friend. He wasn't. It's absolutely clear that he wasn't. So why are the media doing that? Then we have hundreds of column inches about this dreadful thing that he did by shoulder tapping this guy. Finally, the Auditor General comes out and says, well, actually, he's not guilty of that at all.
Only because the law didn't allow
this is the
or didn't
Herald's
determine.
report on his vindication against the thousands and thousands of column inches that were written about when he'd done something wrong. So there's something not fair happening there.
I think that underplayed it in the print edition. There was more on their website, I have to say.
That's a curious argument. You have to go and look at another branch of the media to get it.
I agree with you. I think it should have had more than that. But look, even Rennie said that it was unusual, that the normal process would have been for him to make the phone call. Now, in sort of bureaucrat speak, that's a pretty telling comment.
He said surprised, and I was surprised.
But in 2004, Trevor Mallard chose the State Services Commission boss all by himself. No panel, no nothing. So Labor are just as guilty of this.
Well, I can tell you the previous Prime Minister shoulder tapped lots and lots and lots and lots of people, and that's really normal. So
it's naive to think
it is absolutely naive.
I agree, and I think we've moved beyond that issue. The issue now is what's going on with our spy agencies. You know, there are 7 bodies that potentially have oversight of what the GCSB does, and not one of them seem to have seen any flags or alarm bells. Now, I think the job for the media now is to go and look at those oversight agencies and say, why not? Why did the Intelligence Coordination Group, for example, not have its finger on this? Now, they're supposed to tie all the pieces together.
Failure, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we'll be reporting on this for some days and weeks ahead. Gavin Ellis, Bill Ralston, Brian Edwards, thank you.